11th, 2010, I'll say, regular meeting of the Littleton Planning Commission. If we could have a roll call, please, first.
Commissioner Bockenstedt. Here. Commissioner Brown.
Here.
Commissioner Coronado. Commissioner Iteraria.
Here, here.
Commissioner Newfinke.
Here.
Commissioner Metcalf.
Here.
Commissioner Ranville.
Here.
Commissioner Samuelson.
Here.
Commissioner Stradopoulos.
Here.
And we do have a quorum. Tonight we have an item of general business. We have the minutes from August 23rd to consider, and our regular sections, unscheduled public appearances, it doesn't appear to be anybody. Long-range planning, if we get to that, and some reports. Are there any additions or changes suggested to our agenda?
I have two. I have two.
David.
On page 3.
Oh, I was asking about the agenda, but hearing none, we'll go on to the minutes.
Sorry.
Go right ahead.
Yeah,
Go right ahead. We'll consider the minutes of August 23rd.
Page 3, line 3, it says if the north retaining wall was removed, I believe actually it's the south retaining wall, the one that stretches along the front of the property. The north retaining wall is right at the corner, wouldn't produce any kind of benefits as far as parking.
I thought it was actually the north one opposite Essex Motel. Okay.
No, but it's south of the existing driveway. The north
yes,
wall
yes,
is 5 feet high, and
That's what I'm thinking too.
Yeah. Yeah, that's it. It's south of instead of north of. And then the only other correction I'd like to suggest is on page 2, line 39, where we're talking about Jack Randall's commentary about this proposal. Actually, I went back and listened to it again. He reported he doesn't usually have a problem. Well, okay, it's a minor quibble, but there's a difference between never having a problem and, well, not usually having a problem.
All right. Anything else? Anyone?
David, would you repeat that one more time? Sorry.
Page 2, line 39.
Uh-huh.
I just suggest putting usually in between doesn't and have.
Okay.
And actually, there is one more, and I think this is more a typo than anything else. On page 3, line 30. Oh, okay. Now that I'm reading it again, I think I see what was meant. It says, and direct DRC to collaborate with the applicant to consider the no parking. Never mind. I'm fine.
Okay. That kind of caught my eye, too. I had one comment. It seemed to me it's on the third page, and maybe I've got this. The Commissioner, line 15, where we talk about the Planning Commission, the motion to approve the resolution. It seemed to me that would come after the motions to amend and so on, and then we finally came to.
Oh, it's what Granicus does to it, strangely enough.
Okay.
Does weird things. We'll mention it to Doreen, see if she can correct it. There's some things she can correct on Granicus, some things she can't, so I apologize, but
it seemed like
not
that.
always the most logical format.
So it really should have been down somewhere around 35.
Well, actually, they're right. The motion came first, and then motions to amend. It was the actual vote that came afterwards. That's what's out of sequence.
Yeah.
Well, I suppose, but the reporting of what the vote was seemed premature
that
there.
Came after the amendments.
And the motion wasn't to approve as amended.
Right.
So the motion was to approve, then amendments were submitted, then we voted on the amendments, then the vote was taken. So the motion is in the correct location. It's just that the vote should be following the motion by norm.
Say again? I'm sorry.
Julio's motion is in the correct location, but the actual vote
which is item 18.
Right.
It should be all the way down at the bottom.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
gotcha.
And that's where you should be the reference as amended.
It's
So
one of
that's
those
where the
things-
confusion is in the summary. It was added up there.
It's one of those things that those of us who were there understood, but at least 2 weeks later,
Yeah.
whether we're going to understand a year from
I
now.
understand, yeah, absolutely, you're right.
And
Yes.
one thing I thought you would cover in
That around.
the paragraph of lines 28 through 32 on page 3, I did not have the chance to go back and review it, so Norm, maybe you can correct me. The way that it reads, that parking, on line 29, that parking is better served by the current sidewalk width, I think is slightly misleading of what I recall being the intent.
I think that was close.
Okay.
Yeah, I reread that.
Are you comfortable with
Yes,
the way it reads?
I am.
Okay, then I'll leave it as such.
I was trying to indicate that the current sidewalk width, even though it's narrower than we wanted, by extending it out into the street for more sidewalk, we lost the parking places, and that was not better for.
Well,
the
yeah, no,
neighborhood.
I remember it because I seconded. It's just sort of the way that it reads doesn't, I mean, to me, the emphasis wasn't that the parking is better served by the current sidewalk as much that if we had to choose, we would rather that we sacrifice sidewalk width and maintain parking than the other way around.
Mostly
But
it
yes,
was-
if you're good with how it reads, that's fine.
I'm okay with that. I think mostly it was, the direction to DRC to
Yeah.
reconsider that portion of it. All right. With those comments noted, let's see, let me call for a vote. Do we approve it as amended after that discussion? Oh, hang on. Yes. All right. Very good. That's a little bit difficult there. I understand with the Granicus.
I'm sorry, what was the vote on that? I missed.
Unanimous.
We're not as good as Doreen, sorry. It was
It was,
unanimous?
it was unanimous. Yes. All right. That brings us to floodplain regulations. We have a staff report. It's going to be presented by Bob Dietz, I believe. And these are amendments to the floodplain regulations. They appear in Chapter 6 of the zoning regulations. For our audience, it looks like this. This blue-covered notebook is all sorts of zoning regulations. Chapter 6 is pertaining to the floodplains, and there are some changes that need to be made that have come down from the federal level and have been in process for a while. So this staff report details them. I'm going to try to remember to refer to sections in the report as report section 1, because in our regulations we also have sections, and I think we're going to become confused, disoriented, and on the wrong page shortly if we don't make distinctions. Our zoning regulations don't have page numbers, and so that also makes it more difficult. All right, with all of that, one more item of business, Commissioners. I suggest that as we work our way through these sections, if we have something we want to change or recommend be reworded, that we do it right there instead of waiting till the very end. So if you would like, we can get a motion on the table, maybe directly after the staff report, and then as we work our way through section by section, I'm sure we'll have questions and answers, and then we can incorporate those amendments as we go instead of getting to section 9 of the report and then trying to go back to the first section. Does that sound workable?
Yes, I do have some questions that may lead to changes that are universal, as opposed to, they don't apply to any specific section, but they apply to the whole thing. So
Okay.
as long as you keep that in, yeah.
Then
Maybe I can do that first, and then we can go on a section by section.
I think that's workable. Let's have the staff report, and
We have two members of Public Services here tonight, Bob Deeds and Fred Baumberger are here who can explain the proposal.
very good. All right, thank you. Bob.
Thank you. You practically took my whole program and condensed it into about 3 minutes, so I think we can I'll try to open it up a little bit again now.
We
My
can
name is
fill the
Bob
time.
Dietz, and I'm the city's floodplain administrator. I'm also the director of engineering and utilities. Most questions that come up about floodplains involve engineering, so they decided that I would be a good person to have on staff to answer those questions. The purpose that we're here tonight is to bring forth to you the Chapter 6 zoning regulation amendments that we'd like to implement here in Littleton. Fred Braunberger is the utilities engineer, and I'll ask Fred to come up in a little bit. Fred and I met with the Colorado Water Conservation Service representative who came out and went through our floodplain zoning regulations page by page with us. It took us about a day. I think it was pretty much the day. And at the end of the day, we found there were just these changes that we have brought to you this evening. So it's not a real, should not be an all-night kind of a thing for you. The current floodplain maps that are in Littleton are dated 1989. So it's been a while since we've looked at, well, we look at the maps every now and then, but since the federal government has really looked at our maps and said, your maps are kind of out of date from what we're doing now. In fact, what the federal government is doing, FEMA, and you read about FEMA in the newspapers, they have a lot more notoriety down in the Louisiana area than we do up here. Sometimes we talk about floodplains, and what we consider a floodplain is like nothing for them, or their floodplains are miles wide, and ours are 150 feet across. So the federal government is now in the process of updating their maps and digitizing all of their maps. So the public will be able to, by the end of the year, be able to go to the library and access the FEMA website and bring up the map for the city of Littleton and see where their property is within that map. And if their property is subject to flooding, they will then find that out if they don't already know. I handed out to you tonight, just before the start of the meeting, a little brochure that we get from the Department of Regulatory Agencies, and it's called Flood Insurance in Colorado and What You Need to Know. These brochures are available here at the city. If a resident comes in, they can look at these and say, gosh, this is information I need to know if I want to buy insurance. But I'm not here to sell you insurance tonight.
Would you put one down there on top of the map just so the people at home can see kind of what the cover looks like? And
I'll open one up here so you can kind of see what they...
get an idea of what it is you just referenced. Very good.
There you go.
And they are here at the city if someone...
We have them here at the city. And Fred, are they also available over at the library, or will they be? Yes.
I don't know if the library has them or not.
Mm-hmm. We may end up, I don't know if they're just available here at the city. We don't have that many questions about floodplains, but when we do, we bring them in and show them what we have.
Okay. Thank you.
10 years ago, FEMA began a program to modernize their old paper maps, which is an example of those are over here on my desk. And the accuracy of the maps on there are pretty hard to read if you're not an engineer or, in some cases, a bank giving a loan on a property. But those maps do show all the street layouts of Littleton and street names, and then they kind of leave it up to whoever's looking at the map to distinguish where their property is in relation to the floodplain map. So now with the digitized form that will be coming out this year, you'll be able to look at the maps from your home computer or come into the library and look at them. Much more user-friendly, I think. The effective date for the new digital maps will be December 17th of 2010. So they're not available yet, but it'll be in December. And this is why we've brought this ordinance to the commission, and we will take the ordinance to the city council so we can adopt the ordinance before the issue date of the maps. Presently, there are no financial impacts on existing properties. If they're already in the floodplain in the map, they'll still be in the floodplains on the new maps. So if you are located in that area of risk, it doesn't change. You're still there. The requirements of the Planning Commission public notice were done in accordance with the zoning code requirements, and I think that's a publication in the Littleton report and a notice. Where else, Fred, would they put that? On our website?
City's website.
Okay. It would have been on the city's website. So hopefully there aren't a whole lot of people here this evening, and so I don't know if there was a real big interest there. There are currently 402 parcels of private property in floodplains. And within those parcels, there's 206 structures that could be affected by the 100-year flood. Or about 1,000 residents, we estimate, could be affected. Existing properties, as I mentioned, existing properties will be grandfathered in and would not be required to comply with new requirements. However, if you were to scrape a house off and put a new house on, you would have to comply with the new regulations, just like you would a building update, electrical, or whatever you do in your home.
For a substantial amount of remodeling.
Yes, or a substantial
much
amount
as you are now. If you move a house, it triggers a lot of things. You need to bring it up to meet the current code, whereas it might not have before. So, yeah, if it's damaged in a fire, that can also trigger that kind of thing.
And I think the cutoff on this, like 50% of the value of the property has been destroyed. Then if you're in a floodplain, and you may not be able to rebuild if you're in the floodplain kind of an area.
That's exactly what I was going to say. Is it comparable to that of what I've done typically in most zoning codes, that if you, or something that's grandfathered, if it's more than 50%, yet I didn't see anything in here that, at least in this part of this thing, that kind of even relates to that?
Is that in the current regulations? So that's in the current.
In the current one?
Yes, that's, so we aren't changing those. Those
Okay.
are the current
Thank you.
regulations. I'm sorry, I have to turn to Fred sometimes to get clarification on that.
Sure. Just if he's not at the microphone, be sure to repeat whatever.
That's what I'm trying to do. Okay.
Very good.
If I don't catch it, let me know.
I'm trying to pay attention.
In the National Flood Insurance Program, residents of Littleton are able to obtain flood insurance for their homes. And like I said, outlining this little brochure will kind of give you an overview of that. You may have heard things like you have to have your insurance premium paid 30 days before some event. So if you were subject to flooding, you may want to get insurance on your home at least 30 days before that storm, because they won't cover it. And in insurance, along the lines of the insurance, you should talk to your insurance agent about flood insurance in your home and what the rates are, because I don't have any of that information. If the city does not adopt the new digital countywide floodplain mapping, flood insurance would no longer be available to private properties. So it's very important that we get our ordinance provisions up to date and with the National Flood Insurance Program. Littleton participates in what's called the community rating system, and we get points for being in that system by notification of property owners. And you'll notice, like in the little report, once a year, there'll be a paragraph about floodplains. We do other notifications at public events like Western Welcome Week. We have a booth there. We talk about floodplains in Littleton and what, what your property may be subject to. So Littleton, through its program, we are rated 7 out of 10 in that category, which is real good. That allows our citizens a 15% discount on their insurance premium rate if they were to take out insurance. So it's very, financially, the citizens appreciate what we're doing, I'm sure. Let's see. The new maps for Littleton are going to be digitized, and I have an example of one of those digitized maps. What I first wanted to show you what's on the screen here. Let me move this. When I say floodplains in Littleton, most people think of the South Platte River as being the floodplain. But in fact, we have numerous little gullies and drainage ways that meander through the city that are also designated floodplains. So there are 11 floodplain-prone areas that are defined on our maps. As you can see, these maps are pretty good scale. What I've done is I've taken the FEMA maps and imposed those on top of our street layout. So I have a little, there shows several houses that are, or lots that are involved. Now, when we get to the scale of speaking with an individual owner, we have much better scale maps than these, but this just gets us in the ballpark when they're talking to people. Someone might say, gosh, I live clear up the street from this, and yes, you do live clear up the street from this, so, but some people are more prone to flooding than others. There's now I was going to show you one of the new maps.
Before you go to the new maps, or maybe including the new maps, I was also looking in your report here, and there is a lot of references to a number of Lomers and Clomers that have been since 96 to 2009. I was wondering, are all of those taken into effect into the new digital format?
Very good question. Yes, they are. We've had these Lomers and Clomers that have carried on over the past 10, 15 years, and now we're bringing them up to date. Up until now, we've had to kind of keep track of them. If there's been a Lomer or Clomer done, Fred keeps a copy of that in our drawer, and if someone comes in and says, gee, I thought I got taken out of the floodplain because this happened, and we can show them, yes, you did, or no, you didn't. So those are maintained by the city.
Well, the reason why I bring it up is because when I was looking at your larger scale, and maybe it also shows a little bit on this, but it appears that there's still a pretty extensive floodplain from your overlay. And I don't know if that's true or kind of.
It's basically about the same floodplain. The maps are just a reprint of the original floodplains. Plus the Clomer and Lomers that have occurred are also reflected in the new limits of the floodplain.
Bob, would you define those for the folks at home, please?
Right, the Lomer is
Clomer, yeah.
Okay.
letter of map revision, is that right?
Clomer is a letter of map revision.
Okay.
And a Lomer is a letter of map revision. A Clomer is a conditional letter of revision, of map revision. So what they do is they get a Clomer first, approved by FEMA. They go out and do the work, create the and do the floodplain improvements, and then they follow up then with a Lomer to finalize the mapping.
how much time is all part of that to do a clomer?
There's quite a bit of time involved there because your consultant, depending on the complexity of your particular site, the engineering that goes into it, and that's the report that Fred and I review, will define the floodplain and the elevation of the water and the effects it has when it crosses streets and goes between houses and that sort of thing. There's quite a bit of time that would go into making those maps, making those clomers. And I believe that the cost just for FEMA to review those is about $4,000. Is that right? Yeah, just for them to review whatever map we put together, they charge us $4,000 to look at our map. And they have a consultant that does that and critiques it. And then
The reason why I bring it up, because a lot of times there are developers that want to do something and they realize that they want to encroach into the floodplain, and then the first thing you say is you're going to need to go through this process.
yes,
And of course, they don't have an idea that it will take them at least 2 years a lot of times and longer
it could
to get
yes.
that all ratified.
Now, what happens is that we generally meet with those owners and their engineer and discuss with them what they're trying to do and give them a feel for whether we think it's really feasible that you spend the money doing this. There's not too many areas in Littleton that are going to be developed or in floodplains. We're basically developed out here in Littleton. The only area that I could say right off that is going to maybe be affected in the future would be the property on South Santa Fe and west of Santa Fe and south of Mineral Avenue that abuts the park area through that area. And that's one open area that does have a floodplain that goes through it. So when they develop that, they're going to have to go through what we call a special exception permit. And that's where they have to provide all the technical documentation to us that we then review. We review it, Urban Drainage Flood Control District reviews it, and I believe the Colorado Water Conservation Board reviews that special exception permit. So they all have their input to it. So it isn't just the city of Littleton that reviews these. But you find that sometimes there's little things that the engineers during the design assume something and then it has to be changed. So there's a little give and take as it goes along.
So you've got an example of a new map that's
yes, there's
digitized?
I've laid that out here. There's a new map here. This is what will be digitally available. And as you can see, if you lived at a certain address, there's really no way for you to look at that and say, oh, is my house in or out? But these are the federal maps that they use, and these are the maps that the banks use to determine if they want to require you to purchase flood insurance as part of your purchase of the property. So now what we have in the office, we have 100 scale maps, and I think what scale is on these, Fred? Do you remember? They used to be at about 1,000 scale, which made it pretty difficult. But now these scale look like they're just a little larger.
Now, is this what will be in effect and be available over the internet as of December 17th then?
Yes.
And so then a person considering buying a property could ask their realtor, or they could access something like this to see
yes.
if their property actually lay in this. And then they could consider these regulations with the revisions, assuming we approve all of this, and understand what the implications were. So that's what the process would be. Look at the map, see if you're involved, if you're buying a piece of property, and then understand what the implications are for that property.
What you find that really happens is the banks call me,
Okay.
and they ask me to interpret FEMA's maps. And they give me an address, and they say, you know, this is the property that wants to have mortgage insurance on it, and is it in the floodplain or not? And they're very, very particular to make sure they get the spelling of my name correctly when they call me. Because if I say no, then it's Mr. Deeds said no. And if I say yes, then it's Mr. Deeds who said you have to have insurance. So I get two black eyes out of it, one way or the other.
No win.
So, but we kind of get put in that box, and that's, we would rather do that and meet with or discuss that with the bank and say, yes, in fact, we will photocopy a section of this, mark where the property is in relation to the floodplain, fax it to the bank, they'll look at it, they'll get back to us. So there's kind of an ongoing discussion so that they are pretty confident of the property that they are taking out a mortgage on.
Very good. Okay.
Let's see. We have taken the, here in the ordinance, you'll see that there's a list of different revisions that are being considered for the regulations. And I've asked Fred to come here tonight so that if there's any question on the particular issues here that he knows what it is and why we were trying to get this changed and, you know, why the feds are wanting it done.
Very good.
So when we get into those questions, I'll have Fred come up. The Development Review Committee has discussed the ordinance and the amendments, and they support the proposed ordinance. The staff recommends the proposed amendments be forwarded to the City Council for their consideration. And as I mentioned, the date is December 17th that the digital maps go into force. So about 30 days before that is our goal to have the City Council approve the ordinance, and then we'll be on track for when it takes effect. Now, if you have some questions, I'm here to answer them, and I'll bring Fred up if I don't know the answer.
Let's get a motion on the table, if we could, at this point. We have a suggested motion included in the report, and then go to questions about the overall product, and then we'll work our way through section by section. So, Julio?
I move that the proposed ordinance amending Chapter 6 of the zoning regulations, floodplain regulations, be approved and forwarded to the City Council.
I'll second that.
All right. Dennis has that down with Julio and Pablo. Very good. All right. Now we can deal directly if we come up with something as an amendment.
Okay.
And let's just start down at that end for comments about the overall product.
Yeah, I have several overall. Actually, I have some general questions, and then I'll go to some specifics on the language. One is, you mentioned there's 402 parcels of private property, 206 structures, and 1,000 residents that might be affected by the regulations. Is there any plan, or have they been notified, or is there any plan to have those property owners and residents notified directly?
Yes, good question. I have an answer for that one. Annually, is it, Fred, that the Urban Drainage Flood Control District sends out a letter to all the residents? They send out a letter to all the residents in Littleton with a map that shows where they are in relation to the floodplain, so they can see where their property is. The map itself is not this FEMA map, but it's a little smaller version, and it just is a map of the particular drainage way that they are adjacent to. Okay. So they can open that up, and they can look at the street names and say, oh, I live at the corner of so-and-so here. Oh, I'm not in the floodplain. But you'll get this notice if you are within it or close to it.
Okay.
So
the next time that they get this notice, will they also be notified that the regulations have been changing?
Yes, that
Suzanne
would
is
be-
shaking her head.
Well, that would be written into the notice that we get from, the notice is not prepared by Littleton. It's prepared by the Urban Drainage Flood Control
Okay.
District. And they will be saying, the maps are now digitized, here's the new digitized map for your area, and so that, they'll see that.
Okay, good. The other general comment that I have, and I don't know if that's necessary to introduce as amendment, you'll have to put up with the fact that I worked as an editor for a long time. In all the sections, I will give as an example line 24 and 25 of page 1. It says that Title 10, Chapter 6, Section 2 is hereby amended. Well, actually, that's the first mistake. This one says section, line 24 says Section 1 underlined, and then Section 2. That's a little confusing as to which ones are referring to. But the main point I would say is hereby amended by the addition of the words in bold print as follows.
Well, it's in,
They're
it's in
not in
large
bold
print.
print, they're in all caps,
Yes, they're all in all caps. I think,
with one exception. So I think it would be easier to correct the bold print, instead of saying in bold print, to say in all caps, but especially because if you go to page 5, line 191, that correction there is actually in bold. So I would suggest, again, I don't know if that's necessary to do it as an amendment or that's just a typographical correction that can be made.
I think that's a typographical.
Yeah, I think that by the time it gets to council will be good. Also on page 6, first line, the first line of that page, line 210, it really should read either colon and strike the B, as the B is repeated on line 212 and 214.
Yes.
And line 220 should be in the plural, should be meat instead of meats.
Good. Thank you.
I do know that legal language has been confusing enough. I don't see any reason why it can't be grammatically correct.
And we can make those changes before
Yeah,
it goes
no,
on.
and again, I don't think that they are. And I do have, I believe,
While you look, let me just mention, Pablos, that's what I was saying. The report is broken into sections, Section 1,
Yes.
Section 2, and they're not in
corresponding
alignment
with the sections, yes,
yes. So
which
that's
is
why-
a little confusing.
Yes, it is. I started relating the two documents and changed halfway through to try to make it more clear.
So another, in the second page of the letter from FEMA dated June 17th, 2010, on page 2, which is on the reverse, I just have a general question because that was not made explicit, at least not to me, in the staff report. First line, it says it must be emphasized that all the standards specified in paragraph 60.3 parenthesis D of the NFIP regulations must be enacted in a legally enforceable document. Is the ordinance that we have in front of us enacting all the standards specified in the paragraph?
That's, I believe they're referenced.
Fred, come up here.
If you don't want Bob to have to repeat everything, come to the
I
microphone.
would rather just have you
please.
say it one time than me, and then I'll leave out a word and be criticized for that part, so I don't want to do that.
And the question was relating what we have
So,
before us.
yeah, again, to repeat the
Paragraph.
question, on the top of page 2 of the letter by FEMA, it states, it must be emphasized that all the standards specified in paragraph 60.3 parenthesis D of the NFIP regulations must be enacted in a legally enforceable document, and I just want a confirmation or not that the ordinance as presented in front of us does do exactly that it enacts all the standards specified in that paragraph.
Yes, it does. Yes, it does, and I failed to mention that right at the get-go here. In our staff report, under legal opinion, the ordinance has been reviewed by the city attorney and is in conformance with federal, state, and local requirements. Is that?
Yeah, and that's kind of a generic language that may talk about this. I just wanted to verify that that's indeed. Those are all the general questions that I have.
Okay, very good. Any other general comments or questions?
The 402 parcels, those are, as I think you had said, they're already included in the floodplains right now?
That's correct. And in fact, I think in the communication, we listed those addresses for you.
Yep.
Now, the federal government won't tell me which ones have insurance. That's some private right to know. So what I'd rather have done is be able to go through here and say, these 5 or whatever don't have insurance, and we should notify those people specifically. But they won't let me, they won't tell me whether they have it or not. I'd have to go door to door and ask each one individually. And
A door-to-door insurance salesman from the city. There's
go.
what we all want.
That's a good way to get shot right off the front porch.
Then the next line says, additional or stricter requirements are proposed in the floodplain regulations. Does that mean there may be changing to have more if they're going to be having stricter requirements?
I think our regulations may be stricter than the federal government in some areas. So we just stay with what we have. We're not downgrading what we have. We're just going to bring the minimum requirements of the feds up to the point where if you buy insurance, you're going to be covered.
So we're not looking at this list changing?
No.
Okay.
Linda?
So the list that we have of the City of Littleton floodplain amended, this list,
Yes.
does it have all of this is a city list, it's not a FEMA list, right?
I think this is our list. Yes. It's a list that the city has generated. What I have done is I've gone to the building department, and we have listed all the addresses in Littleton that are within or close to the floodplain. So if a person comes in and take out a building permit, say for a garage extension on their house, and they have to fill in order to build that, there's a red flag that goes up that says engineering needs to look at this building permit because this property has a flood restriction on it. So it'll come to me, then we'll review it. We may ask for more information from the architect for the property owner to provide us based on elevation of the house, where's a flood wall or something like that, so you can protect the property. So that's how we process building permits, and so it's just a flagging that we do.
So will this list change with the new map?
No, the list will stay the same. There may be more properties that go on it if there's some change to the floodplain, or if someone were to do some modifications on their side of the creek that then would affect the other person on the other side of the creek, we don't allow them to raise the floodplain more than a foot, and we don't allow them to impact their neighbor with what they want to do. So if they were to ask, to fill the floodplain and impact their neighbor, we're here to stop them from doing that.
And also on this list, what does the NAs mean? There's a parcel number, but on the address it says NA.
Fred, is that not applicable? No address, it's a vacant lot. So that's going to be on the computer. Someone says, I want to build a house here. boom, it's going to come to engineering for its final sign-off. Hopefully we catch it.
Okay. About done this way. General comments? David?
Just to, at least on the report, I'm not sure you call them general or not, but just for information. Right now, you're saying we're rated as a Class 7 community in the CRS. Is there anything in particular the city could do or should consider doing to improve that rating? Does it have any substantive effect on insurance rates or anything else?
Fred, could you answer that? Because I think you've done some work on that. If we wanted to get a rating of 8, what would we entail to be able to do that? You have to come up to the microphone.
In the community rating system, communities are rated and given points in about a dozen different categories, ranging from regulatory standards to drainage system maintenance to open space preservation, a bunch of categories like that. The city's programs and policies are reviewed and assigned points in those categories, and then they're summed up, and based on the total number of points you get by going through that analysis, the city is placed in a certain class. And right now, based on the existing city programs, the city's a Class 7. About every 5 years, FEMA comes out and reviews the city's programs and policies and does a re-ranking of those. And as part of that review, they make recommendations. If you do more in this area, you might get more points, or in this area here. And that would give the city the opportunity, if they expand their programs or policies, to get more points and probably improve the city's rating.
So the last recommendation, set of recommendations was received when?
In 2006 was the last review of the city's program, and they do these reviews about every 5 years, so I anticipate next year the city will be going through this community rating system review for another iteration.
So up to now, nothing of real significance that's shown up in terms of recommendations of, tweaking this or changing a policy here or doing something about open space around a drainage channel could improve that rating?
The last review, they gave us some recommendations, and the city's been working towards implementing those. At our next review, they'll review the progress the city has made, and it may or may not change the city's rating.
Okay. And what general effect would that have as far as the public is concerned, property owners, as far as the class rating?
Each class rating is worth a 5% discount on flood insurance premiums.
Great.
Right now, the city's a Class 7, so they get 3 times 5, or a 15% discount on their flood insurance premium. If the city were to improve to a Class 6, that would change to a 20% discount.
Great. Very clear. Thank you. Oh, sorry. I did have one more. On page 3 of the report down at the bottom, it says that the new map is using a National Geodetic vertical datum updated to 1988 that's 3 feet higher than the previous datum. Is that strictly a housekeeping detail? Does it have anything that it has no effect on measurement of where somebody is relative to the floodplain?
No, that is just housekeeping, and it's just the newer standard that we use for our elevation basis in Littleton. Littleton didn't raise up 3 feet in the past 20 years.
I didn't think so, but I think what I had in mind was this hopeful idea that, well, gee, maybe that pushed a lot of properties up 3 feet, and therefore they wouldn't be in the floodplain anymore.
Everybody moved 3 feet, so
yeah, right.
We're all relatively the same.
Okay, so just a question of the reference point for elevations.
Yes.
Okay.
So if we were Denver, we would not be 5280, we'd be 5283.
That's right.
Anything, Kurt?
Just a general comment, I think, on flood insurance in the residential mortgage industry. We hire a flood insurance service that we contract with to provide us the flood insurance map, whether the property is in a flood zone or not in a flood zone. Then we make the determination whether we require flood insurance, and then they go to their insurance agent to purchase that insurance. So, and I was telling Jenny earlier, in my 27 years in the business, I've had 3 properties that I've had written loans on that were in flood zones, so it's not very common.
And I'll also include another sidebar. Some banks will require insurance on a property if any part of the lot is in the floodplain.
I've run across that before.
And then some banks will say, is the house involved in the floodplain? And that's when they get into defining whether they want. So banks have their own criteria.
I had a situation where we had a property where the corner of the lot was in the flood zone. We got an engineer's report and a survey, and we were able to prove that the house wasn't anywhere near the flood zone, and we were able to avoid paying for flood insurance.
Great.
Very good. Linda, again?
I have a question with regard to the DRC. Were there any significant issues that came up during that meeting?
No, there were not.
Okay.
And Jenny, who's our alternate?
Yes, Jenny.
I have a question more just on some additional information, which I was looking over your shoulder at that map, talking about the zone of the designations of AO, A, AE, AH. Could you talk a little bit more about those specific categories and how that impacts residents if they're in these different zones?
Fred, could you come up and we'll point at the map here on that? There's a good, this one I just happened to put up. Let's just discuss some of those designations that they have. Each of the maps have, and if you were on the computer, each of the maps have a tabulation of those categories in the upper right-hand corner of the map itself.
Could you actually show that, perhaps?
Slide that over a little bit.
Show that.
If you could zoom in on this area up here.
I think you're going to have to recenter.
Yeah, if you can. Yeah, you have to move it.
Go.
I have to fold my map down. This is like being on vacation.
Yeah.
Map of the state of Colorado here.
You've driven so fast, you've driven off the edge.
There we go. Now you can see some of those zoning designations. And what was your question about those?
Essentially, can you talk about what would be the zoning designations that are the most strict versus those that maybe are less impacting residents if they're in certain zones? And in our area in Littleton, what is the most significant zone for the floodplain area that could be impacting residents? The different drainage, are we talking about the Platte or various? I was just curious as far as the zones.
In answer to your question, the most strict zone in Littleton would be Zone AE, base flood elevations determined. In those zone districts, a flood study has been done to determine the actual elevation of the regulatory flood, and that's the most detailed zone district. Basically, it establishes an elevation where development has to be 1 foot above that elevation. In regards to the other zone districts, Zone AH is an area of shallow flooding, 1 to 3 feet deep, or to designate an approximate elevation. And then Zone A is the least specific zone district. It's just an area of an approximate flooding. A detailed study has not been done in those particular zone districts. And we're revising the ordinance to include those zone districts in the ordinance. Right now, there's no reference to any FEMA flood zone district in the ordinance.
Very good. All right. I had one question of my own. In the definitions, we added a definition for historic structure. And is that something that's kind of unique, or is that something that we're seeing in general for ordinances? Is that specific to Littleton?
I think that's specific to the feds. That's how they define historic structures, but we could define it in, much more restrictive, or
Okay, so
that would be the minimum description they would look for.
it does appear in the federal regulations then, and it just wasn't in ours before? Because the entire definition, along with some others, is apparently being added. It wasn't in our zoning.
Right.
Chapter 6 before. Okay.
And I think they're probably getting into historical stuff because, like the flood down in Louisiana, a lot of historic structures were flooded. So they finally determined that they need to have a category for historic structures.
Okay.
A good question. We might talk about making that more specific to local designated landmarks and districts, because I'm not sure this language would cover it to the extent we want to.
When we got to that, I was going to ask about the list of merit.
Well,
David.
then let's take it by section, but I think what we're going to find is we can be more restrictive with the federal definition. I don't think we're going to be allowed to be less restrictive.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Okay. I think we've covered general commentary. Shall we delve into the report section 1? And in this instance, it's referring to Title 10, Chapter 6 in the zoning code, Section 2 of the code, and several definitions here. I didn't count how many. Let's just start on the first page of the ordinance and work our way through.
Actually, on this, it just occurred to me a way in which we can make things look a lot less confusing. Is it possible in the ordinance or in the resolution to simply add a line that indicates that it would read Section 1, Title 10, Chapter 6, Section 1 of the Littleton City Code is left unchanged? And then we go into Section 2, Title 10, Chapter 6, Section 2, so that the report section and the ordinance sections match with each other. Just, I think, may minimize some confusion and simply state, as you do somewhere.
Problem with that
Yeah,
is-
I mean, in page 2 of the staff report, it states that Section 1 is no changes, so.
So you're just saying placeholders for all the unchanged so that we have a relationship between Section 1 of the report?
Yeah, and that way, that summary that is included, which is very useful, actually,
That'd be a great idea, except in some cases, you've got a section on the report that references the same, two sections in the report that reference the same section in the ordinance. So I think we're going to have to get used to the idea of talking about a section in the proposed ordinance versus
Yeah,
a section
because they're
in
talking
the
about
existing ordinance.
subsections, yes.
Good point.
Okay.
Let's try to work with it this way.
All right.
Council can be warned that they'll have to correlate this. Looking at report section 1, which involves definitions from section 2 of the code, some additions, and the one I note, I guess, that came up over and over, and I don't think it's problematic, referred to, it's changing mobile in reference to mobile home park to manufactured. And then we have a definition that more or less involves structures that involve a permanent chassis, whether or not they go onto a foundation. So that occurs over and over in the language, and I don't see it being problematic.
My understanding is that the change in the language is to conform to the federal language. And as such, is that correct?
That's correct.
So And as such, I think that way we might as well stay consistent.
Oh, absolutely. Yep. But I was making note of that. Is there anything else, David? Do you want to speak to the historic structure definition?
Actually, I'd like to go back to the manufactured versus mobile. I guess my question is, I understand, in the day, 50 years ago or 60 years ago, going back to the last flood, mobile homes were mobile homes. These days, they're manufactured. I understand that. Where does an Airstream trailer fall in? Is it a manufactured home? It's not an RV? What is it?
It does address that, I think, as vehicles that have quickly disconnectable utilities, and those are designated as RVs.
So then there's a time constraint there as far as how long it can be on the property and that sort of thing?
Correct. That is on page, that's the editing that's on page 6. Yes, on page 6. It talks about very specifically that.
So it isn't covered by the definitions. It's covered by the language in the ordinance saying what can or cannot be attached.
It's covered by the definition starting on line 82, is my understanding, on page 2, and then also it is further defined.
Well, actually, that's what prompted my question, because I've seen Airstream trailers that are considerably bigger than 500 square feet and therefore would not count as a recreational vehicle. But the language you're talking about further on, as far as being connected or how long it can be mounted on the site, that should cover it. I just wanted to make sure everybody understood that even though that kind of mobile home isn't really defined in there, the provisions of the ordinance do cover it.
Yes.
Okay.
Again, a question of clarification, especially regarding Jennifer's question. In section 1, the paragraph that starts on line 27, area of shallow flooding, that is usually designated ZO, AO, or AH. And it's my understanding that at this point we have no properties with that designation within the city of Littleton.
Oh, we have properties that are in that.
That are AO or AH? Okay, because on the on the list of properties that you included at the end of the flood report, I've seen AE. There are a couple of areas where the photocopy is not really clear, but I did not see anything that is either AO or AH. So I'm just curious as to where those would be, unless those are considered open space. Do all the AO and AH fall on city-owned open space areas?
I was just looking at a map here to see if I can pick one off.
Government at work.
The AO is not platted or not developed, I believe. Is that just going from memory, Fred? I say AE is right in the floodplain. AE is right in the.
Yeah, AE, the majority of the properties appear to be AE, but I'm just, the area of shallow flooding, not that we shouldn't have the language in there, but just wanted to see whether there are any properties that we actually have on that.
If a property was subject to that, what occurs in that definition, and also was in the AE, would it then be designated AE, even though, the fringe or the upper edge of it might be AO for the purposes of that, 1 foot to 3 feet? I guess that's what I'm asking is, could you have a property that it's designated in our list AE because it's predominantly that, say, 30% and 10% of it would be the AO designation, except that it has the other.
Do you know of any AO areas, Fred, that in our mapping? I just.
Okay, so So to repeat that, at your recollection at this point, Fred, there are no AO or AH properties within the city of Littleton, but the designation is in the ordinance because the designation exists on the county map.
For AO, yes.
Fred?
Is
They're not going to get you on the recorder. They're not going to hear you on that.
The list of floodplain properties is a list of private properties in Littleton. There is some AH property in Littleton in the floodplain, but it's public property, so it doesn't show up on the list. The Centennial Littleton Golf Course south of Bowles Avenue, that's an example of an AH zone district, but it doesn't show up on the list because it's all public property, a public golf course.
Okay.
And there may be examples of AO, but I don't know those off the top of my head.
But
That's good.
the property all falls into, currently the properties fall into a category whether or not it's AO.
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify, especially in relation to the
And
question.
even though we don't have a lot of opportunity for annexation or expansion, it's conceivable that other properties that fall within those categories could
No,
be brought into
absolutely.
the city.
I agree that it should be there. I just wanted a clarification, especially in light of the earlier question that Jenny had as to the what was the highest designation that existed within any of the properties. So just for clarification.
Yeah, that's the reason behind some of these changes is since we're going to a new county-wide map, not a map specific to Littleton, the ordinance has to be in conformance with the county-wide map.
That helps. Thank you very much.
Linda?
Along the lines of the zoning designation, I noticed that the X zone is not included in a lot of these ordinances. For example, on line 37, the X zone is not included. Is that intentional?
Fred, do you have an answer for her?
What X-zone?
There's a number of different sections that reference the zoning.
And those are the FEMA
Yeah, this is
map
FEMA
zones.
Those are FEMA zones, those are not our zoning categories.
Oh, the X zone, Fred, if you correct me if I'm wrong, I think that's a 500-year event, is the X zone area. A 0.2% chance of occurring.
Yeah, that's one of the
Is it
Zone
on?
X designations is areas outside the 100-year floodplain, but within the 500-year floodplain.
And so that's on the legend,
Yes.
I think is what Steve was saying, on the maps.
You'll find that some cities, probably across the country or towns, they do have some 500-year floodplains for some specific reason. I think the feds would like to push us into that, but I think there's going to be a lot of people that are going to say, no, we don't want to be there. So,
Don't want to regulate that.
Well, we have quite a few of them here that are listed in the X.
the X area, they're just,
So the ordinance as it currently stands
That would be-
will not apply to them.
right, because the ordinance we have applies to 100-year event, not 500-year event.
And that's county-wide, so we're
Countywide.
still being consistent. All right.
So even though they're on our list of properties here, if they're an X, they're not associated with this?
We're not regulating on them at all. They're close by. They're probably someone that would buy insurance just to be on the safe side.
But the Enser property is designated as an X zone.
Currently, yeah.
I think, Linda, the question you're getting at is, what does this bode for those people who are in an X zone if it's not covered in the ordinance? And I guess, given that most of the properties in the flood zone going through Shadycroft have that designation, they'd probably be curious as to what that means for them.
It just means they're in the 500-year floodplain. You know, they're not in the 100-year. They're in the 500-year floodplain in the X zone area.
I don't believe FEMA will even allow you to get flood insurance in the X zone. I couldn't be certain of that, but I don't believe that the FEMA will provide insurance, or an insurance agent will provide insurance through FEMA in an flood zone, because they don't think it's ever going to flood.
But I understand that there have been some issues within the city of Littleton with specific properties that have the X zone designation because they were subject to the floodplain ordinances. Answer?
I wasn't aware of the fact it became an issue.
Became an issue in what way?
In that it impacted, it's my understanding, it impacted the sale of the property because it was in the flood zone. But that is nothing that I have confirmed, but it was a significant issue.
Nevertheless, let's, we've looked at a lot of, discussed the zones in the list. Can we move to page 2 perhaps? Are we good on page 1? Is there anything anyone wants to propose amending anything on page 1? Let's work it that way. I think we're good. Page 2, I had a designation about historic structure. Is there anything else on that page first that comes to mind for anyone? I just made a note. Here it has 2 criteria. Any structure that is listed on the National Register of Historic Places or by the Colorado Historical Society or has been certified to contribute to the historical significance of a registered historical district. Now, we have a lot of properties that are on the list of merit in the city, and that isn't in alignment with either A or B, those other 2 items. So is there, I guess, I would like to add, or as C under that, so I'm proposing an amendment, item C on the list of merit. And I'd like to see what the other commissioners' consideration of that is.
My question is, can
we do that? I don't think we can.
what difference does it make? I mean, we have a reference to historic structure here, but I'm honestly not entirely sure what its significance within this ordinance is.
Under the definitions, and I guess indicating that we consider one's eligible on the list of merit.
But is there any special consideration that this ordinance gives to anything that is defined as historic?
I don't think it appears anywhere else. Julio.
Recognizing the fact that we are now talking about a historical places and building, et cetera, as part of the referral for this, did it go to our historical group commission that reviews everything from a historical side that this could affect?
This ordinance, no, it did not go to Historic Preservation Board. I might just comment that if a building permit application comes in, and if the property's on the list of merit, I mean, it's going to have, the building clerk brings up that property record, it's going to show 2 warnings. It's going to show a warning about it being in the floodplain, and it's also going to show it as a warning that it's either historical structure or it's on the list of merit. And that list of merit puts a building permit hold on for so many days so that the historic preservation planner can look at it. And also, it will get routed to the engineering department because it's in a floodplain. So, I mean, both of those issues get reviewed by staff if somebody comes in for a building permit.
Well, I think the question is, why did they bother to define it? What is it that happens later?
It's on page 6, I believe, number 5, section 10. Variances may be issued for the reservation, rehabilitation, or restoration of historic structures without regard to the procedures set forth. Remainder of this ordinance. So if you're listed as one of their designated historic structures, I guess I would think that the other thing we might want to do, because this is talking about nationally identified structures, we might want to add in that definition locally designated, because this wouldn't address that either, I don't think. because not all locally designated structures are in historic districts. We might want to have that as an addition. That'd be easy to do, is listed on the National Register of Historic Places or by the Colorado Historical Society or by the City of Littleton.
We may need to look at that, because when we're talking about variances, we are talking about being more lenient. So where the feds are saying you can adopt codes more strict than ours but not more lenient, to stick in here that our local designated can apply for a variance would be making our code more lenient than the federal code, and I'm not sure that we have the authority to do that. We need to check with them and see where they would stand on that.
Okay.
So would it be agreeable that you would look into some wording that would cover that, since you know what we're talking about?
I mean, I think we'd need to talk to them. You didn't talk to them specifically about that, did you? So, yeah, I think you would have to have a conversation with them about would our regulations still be compliant if we were to add into the variance locally designated or list of merit structures.
We can do that before it goes to the city council.
So maybe just a follow-up from Planning Commission. Planning Commission had inquired about this, and here's the response from.
And, you know, that's why I've got paragraph C here.
David.
If I'm reading this right, what this says on the section that Dennis referenced, Title 10, Chapter 6, Section 9, subsection B, that's talking about variances. If we're talking about variances in local procedures for applications for rebuilding, et cetera, that's one thing. If we're talking about special considerations beyond what the feds demand on reconstruction in that flooded property, we're not going to be allowed to do that. Okay, so if we want to investigate it, turn it over to Historic Preservation Board with recommendations on how we word the definition, that's fine, but that distinction has got to be made. We can change procedures locally. We can't change requirements federally. But
I'm comfortable with having the staff review that, and whatever comes out of that, then it goes to City Council that way. If the list of merit is allowable and not considered to be more permissive, then fine. If it doesn't work for the federal regulations, it won't be in compliance with them, then I'm good with that. Pavlos.
Can we then maybe do a straw poll in terms of it's the desire of the Planning Commission to amend the definition of historical structure to be consistent with local regulations to the degree to which federal regulations permit it, or something along those lines? Because if that's something that only a couple of us feel that we should even bother doing, then I don't see any reason.
The city attorney suggested a possibility as or locally designated. Does that?
Yeah, I was just saying, can we see a show of hands of how many of us may want to actually do that, so that at least there's an indication?
Everybody that wants to see some sort of modification in this definition.
Assuming that the federal regulations permit it.
How about a show of hands? Yeah. Looks like there's, well, maybe 3, 4. Okay. Then that would carry, which is, I think, what
and since we are
hoping for.
On that, I think I may have noticed another typo. Line 226, the last word, reservation, presumably should read preservation. Variances may be issued for the preservation, not the reservation. Would that be correct? Okay.
Is that how you were on page 6 again?
Page 6, line 226, the last word on that line.
Oh, yes. Preservation. All right. Okay. Page 3. No, page. What page? 3. All right. Yes. We finish with the definitions at the top. We move on to Section 2 of the report, which references Section 3 of the zoning Chapter 6. We're changing definitions from Littleton to Arapahoe County and incorporated areas. Bob indicated that this is making things more consistent county-wide. Are we good with Section 2? Any question or discussion?
Other than the typo with the quotation marks between incorporated areas and dated December 17th.
Yeah.
Okay.
The
Paulus.
I would think there was, I would simply say, since in here you're listing that the planning division, the public library, and the city clerk's office will have those maps, if we can also ensure that the flood insurance pamphlets exist in those same 3 locations.
Yes.
Yeah, because you earlier said you weren't sure if they will be at the library or not. And so since that information is the library, it would be good if
that is
those are the maps.
The flood insurance study itself, that's these maps.
Yeah, and I would just, simply ask that in all the locations where they will find this information, they can also find this flyer just for the convenience of the public.
Very good.
All right. Report section 3, which is referencing section 6 of the zoning code, subsection D. And we have a entire paragraph under number 4 added. Any comments or questions?
Question about a couple of the commas.
All right.
On line 120 and 121, it says, unless it is demonstrated that, comma, the cumulative effect of the proposed development, comma, will not increase the water surface. It's just something that doesn't make sense.
Read the Second Amendment to the Constitution.
Yeah, well,
I was wondering
that was 200 years ago or more, and that didn't come in front of me.
How would anyone actually demonstrate that, physically demonstrate to you that by survey? Mm-hmm. Right.
What we require them to submit is called a, what is that? Flood analysis that we require. Yeah, it's called a HEC2 computer simulation of the conditions. And in that, you plug in the elevations of properties and buildings and the ground before and after. You run it through the computer, and then it tells you what the floodplain limit is based on some modification that you've done.
So you don't have to get a wet table out at the Fed Center to build.
Right.
All right.
Basically, this would be a contour survey. It would go likely go well beyond the limits of the property itself.
Yes.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Dennis, do you see the 2 commas that I'm talking about?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah. Okay.
Section 4, then, of this report, which is referencing, again, subsection B, 1, parent A, parent 2 of the Littleton City Code, and that, we flip over to the next page, page 4 of our report. We're, again, changing mobile to manufactured. Any discussion there? We're basically, in this section, resisting flotation, collapse, or lateral movement. We're anchoring manufactured homes that might move under flood conditions. And it's in addition to anchoring requirements for wind forces. All right. Section 5 of this report, which references subsection B, 1, parent small b of the Littleton Code, a rather large paragraph that involves fully enclosed areas below the lowest floor that are used solely for parking of vehicles. And if I read this correctly, this is making sure that water pouring into such a structure will be able to exit without knocking its way out through the far wall, to put it bluntly, and perhaps bringing down the rest of the structure. This is a third of a page paragraph. Is there any discussion or consideration? I'm hearing none. Nicely done. Section 6 now.
we've got our area zones or any areas of shallow flooding, and some words added, or to the depth number specified on the firm, the flood insurance map that we've talked about. Any considerations about the changes, questions?
There are more clarification than there are changes.
That's true. It's Julio says it's more of a clarification and changing the language to be consistent with the rest of the county. All right, Section 7. Now we're rolling.
You know, I almost have to ask this question. Even though it's not part of the change, it's existing. How do you have the lowest floor, including a basement, elevated 1 foot above the highest adjacent grade? You're floating it? I mean, what you're saying is you can't have a basement in those zones.
Right.
And if that's all it is, then a plain statement to that effect would be appreciated.
Yeah.
You can't build below grade on those sites.
But that's language existing in our
I realize
regulation.
that. I'm just trying to get clarity in case this ever comes up. And right.
That's when you come in and ask
The
Bob.
simple yes or no will work.
Fred, give me a simple yes or no.
He's taking the fifth.
Fred's contemplating.
Well, I'll give you, for instance,
Thinking
somebody
about a
comes in with an application or something, and they want to, modify a structure or whatever, and it's a little below the highest grade on the site. That essentially says can't do it in those flood zones.
Difficulty doing it, even if it was out of the floodplain, knowing that after it was dug down as a basement, that it was in the floodplain.
I don't think it's, well, I don't think it says that you can't have a basement because this other addition or to the depth number specified on the firm.
No, you can have a basement as long as it's higher than any adjacent grade. That's not a basement.
Or the depth number specified on the firm.
Whichever is highest. Okay,
Yes.
so you still can't have it. Okay, that's all I'm getting at. If I'm on a sloping site, okay, I'm thinking specifically of some of the sites in the R5 zone, backing onto Skunk Hollow and Santa Fe. That means they can't have basements.
Depending where they are on the map.
Those areas are not actually in a floodplain.
Okay.
But, yeah.
I'm just saying as a physical example of what I'm talking about.
Fred.
If you go back to the definition section, there's a new definition for highest adjacent grade, and the highest adjacent grade is the highest natural elevation of the ground surface prior to construction next to the proposed walls of a structure. I think the section in question, you can have a basement as long as fill is first placed on the site, so you bring the basement floor above that highest adjacent grade by definition, which existed prior to development.
So no excavated elevation, no excavated structure. You can do a berm structure, earth-sheltered structure, something like that, or you can build up around a lower floor that's built on the existing grade, or at least 1 foot above the existing grade.
Yeah, it basically prohibits a floor elevation below the existing grade, but doesn't prohibit one if you fill the site and raise it up.
Okay, that's the clarification I was looking for, Fred.
There's a
And
possibility.
actually, Fred, since you're there, maybe that's it. That applies both to Section 6 and Section 7. I noticed that you had zones A, AO, or AH, but not Zone AE. And I'm just curious, A, if that was intentional, and B, what's the rationale? So line 155 and line 163 on both report section 6 and section 7 specify zones A, AO, or AH, but don't specify zones AE.
That's because Zone AE has a flood elevation determined, and that's what determines the regulatory flood limit, that the exact elevation as surveyed, rather than a depth of flooding or a height above the existing.
Because AE is so already specified that while they are those zones, you need to give some additional specificity.
It would be above that specified elevation.
Thank you.
AE was the most strict, was his response to
Yeah, and the most clearly defined. Okay, thank you.
All right, so now we're on section 7. Thank you, Fred. And the rest of that paragraph, Julio? Yeah, okay. Pretty straightforward, says Julio, or to the depth number. This is, again, just sort of updating language. Are we good with that? We're on to page 5. Section 8 of this report, which is Chapter 6 in zoning regulations, Section 8, subsection B, 2, parent C. And again, we've got manufactured replacing mobile. And in this area was where Paulos noted we have actually finally bold instead of all caps, so either way.
Line 191.
Yes, on line 191. This specifies some requirements for anchoring systems, so they don't end up becoming houseboats, I guess. Any other comments or questions, commissioners? All right, section 9 of our report, where we add a paragraph under E, small e, recreational vehicles placed on sites within zones A1 through A1-30, AH, and AE. There's your AE. On the map shall either be, and then we have three, I guess, different categories, on a site for fewer than 180 days, be fully licensed and ready for highway use is the second possibility, or meets the elevation and anchoring requirements for manufactured homes in one of the other sections. Paulos.
Yeah, on page 5, the last line, line 207, it talks about within zones A1-30. That's the first reference to such zones. I'm just kind of curious. Up until now, we make reference to zones A, AO, AE, and AH. I haven't seen references to A1 through A30, and I'm wondering if that's correct, or is that supposed to be A and AO, and it's a typo?
We've got on the first page A1-99.
Yeah, A1 through A99, that's correct.
Yes,
and again, AO is not included on this, so I just wanted to make sure that that language there is correct.
Maybe staff can just.
Yeah, and all you need to do is just sort of double check that. I noticed AO is not there; it's only A1 through A30, and just because it's a little different than everywhere else, just double check that it's actually correct. And yeah, it's just sort of those numbers can
be an oversight, and he'll check it out.
Exactly, that's all.
Staff is going to verify that.
And again, just kind of as a reminder of the corrections on line 210, 212, 214, and 220, just to make the grammar. Okay, that's all.
And this is where we talk about the recreational vehicle is attached to the site only by quick disconnect type utilities and security devices and has no permanent attached structures. Sort of goes back to our earlier discussion. Section 10 of this report, which references Section 9, subsection B of the Littleton City Code, variances, and we had a typo, preservation, and this is about variances for historic structures. I think we hashed this out before.
Just a question. Those variances, will they be issued administratively, or will they have to go in front of the Board of Adjustments?
It looked like it came to the Board of...
Or the Historic Preservation Board.
To us.
Yeah.
We're responsible for any projects within the floodplain regulations.
Somewhere in here, or, oh, it's a variance procedure, and they don't have page numbers, but it's in the blue book.
Chapter 6 have a separate variance procedure?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
1069.
Yes.
All right, thanks.
Under A, it says the commission.
Yeah, okay.
is
Under
hereby
regulations, we have a variance category in that area.
Yeah, we've got a whole section. This is just amending that.
Yeah.
To include historic. All right. Now I've completely lost track of the page. We were there. I think we're about wrapped up. Section 10, that's where we were. Section 11, severability. Section 12, repealer, and so on. All right. My recollection is we didn't really come up with anything that we were specifically going to amend. So we have a motion and a second on the floor, and Julio is going to call for the question. Very good. In a formal setting, in a more formal setting, we would vote on the call for the question. I don't believe there's any dissent to that. So all of those in favor of, well, let's see. Let me find my stuff. Let me read this to you. I hear voting going on. All right, the motion was to approve the changes of an ordinance amending Chapter 6 and forward to City Council. So all those in favor are voting yes. And it is unanimous.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Very difficult item to cover in one evening, I can tell you.
Can I make a recommendation for City Council to include a listing of the zonings, like the terminology that you see on that map there?
Okay.
And also to include a zoning map, because that was very helpful to see it here on the screen.
Okay. Very good. Thank you.
The other recommendation I'll make is typically when we have public meetings, a proof of the public notice is provided as an amendment, as an exhibit to us, so that may be something that you want to make sure that you include. It's usually a photo.
It isn't a public hearing. I mean, not in that sense. It's not a zoning hearing. So there will be no proof of publication because a legislative enactment will just be posted on the agenda.
Okay, because it says the requirements for public notice were completed.
Right. So there was no sign, no notice in the paper, well, unless you put one in, but there's no requirement for it, so I doubt there was.
Okay, then maybe
Public
that should be
notice would have just
specified
been
in the
notice
legal
of the
opinion
meeting.
that
Yeah,
in
just
the
the-
requirements, okay. And then another thing is just as a request to Dennis and the city, after this is approved on, there's a section on the city website where we list maps when the digital maps become available. If we can include a link on there, you know where I'm talking, on the website.
We would normally have a section that would show up on our website that talks about the new maps that are going to be issued.
Yeah, and I just sort of,
how you get to them. That's
yeah, if someone gets that information to Kathy Weaver and we get it up on the website just to make things easier for the public.
Thank you, Bob. Thank you, Fred.
Thank you both.
That was the only item of general business. There does not appear to be anyone here for an unscheduled public appearance. No public hearings, long-range planning. I think we're going to dispense with anything there. Reports from staff.
Tuesday night, I sent a notice on Friday, I think, just real quickly, that tomorrow night City Council is going to have a study session where they'll be talking with Steve Anderson and Al Calusi about the old sheriff site on Littleton Boulevard. Just a proposal that Al and Steve have for that site, and City Council kind of getting more information on that and an opportunity to ask questions. You might remember, I think you had a study session in probably April or May, I think, where they actually had more of a presentation on the context for the site and kind of general issues. So I thought it may be of interest to be there tomorrow night and just kind of hear where City Council goes with it.
Not a zoning presentation, it's a presentation on a land swap.
So, land swap and an intersection potential, I think it's on both. Yeah, so, and second, Historic Preservation Board last Monday night, Wednesday night, I don't know what night it was, Wednesday I think it was, they had it was a busy week last week. Wednesday night they had their first meeting talking about design guidelines for the Historic Preservation District, the Historic District downtown, Main Street. As you know, we've had the discussion, we have the design standards and guidelines for all of downtown. This would be specific to the historic structures. We had several members of the Planning Commission there. It was a good discussion. There wasn't a huge turnout, but a really good presentation and discussion. They'll have additional meetings. Nori will actually come back to the next meeting with a proposed draft, an initial draft, in terms of here's what the guidelines might look like. They were talking at the first meeting more about format and kind of how they work and what they really are. But it should move along fairly quickly. We're having a meeting tomorrow with Andrea and Kirsten and me to talk about how do we actually work this into the enabling language for the design standards and guidelines, because right now, as you know, they're triggered in the zoning code, so we need to figure out what's the relationship legally between what they're proposing and what we have currently. So we're working on that kind of background stuff as well.
There were several handouts, and probably they're available if anyone's interested, at that sort of a project overview and some discussion questions. Nori did a good job leading that. I had a couple things. On the 5th of this month, there was a resolution presented by Jan for council to reaffirm a resolution affirming the City of Littleton's 3-mile plan, which was originally approved in August of 2009. The 3-mile plan, without getting too specific, regards annexing into the city. And so it was reaffirmed. I don't remember the vote. I think it might have been unanimous. But anyway, there was something that kind of involved planning and annexation that came up at the council meeting. And, of course, that you can review that. Linda?
And how would that impact the comprehensive plan development? Because don't we need to include annexation in the plan, or?
It doesn't really. It's just a statutory requirement that every year we talk about where our utilities go and what we would serve within the 3 miles. So it's just to say that we have ability to serve or we don't.
It doesn't really set policy at all. Yeah, okay. It really is just kind of data more than anything. So it just references the comp plan. It references the comp plan, but really it's just data in terms of where could we serve.
The most interesting details, probably, I'll qualify that, is how the maps are drawn regarding those boundaries. Mm-hmm. And
very interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, it's not
not a straight line.
Yeah. And I had, here we are. Let's see. I think maybe I reported on this. Craig is not here, and I don't know if he made it to the last HP board meeting.
He did not. Craig called and apologized for not being able to be here tonight. He had a work conflict. So.
I believe what we did, if I remember, deferred the report after our last hearing. I stepped in as liaison for one meeting. It was the meeting that was August 16th. I'll be brief. They were discussing a COA for the Culp Block Theater, which is, I don't know what it is now. It used to be the Family Bar and Restaurant next to Jose's. In short, and it was posted, sort of doing some modifications to the facade to take it back to where it looks more like the theater facade, and then I think also accommodate some sidewalk seating perhaps. They talked about the wall around the patio area at the Carnegie Library, which is the melting pot, discussed the grant application, certified local government grant applications, and so on. They're working on updating the list of merit. We spoke a little bit about that. And let's see. That's about it. Is that brief enough?
Great. In the list of merit, again, they're focusing on downtown just so they could provide that information to you. So,
did anybody go to the State APA conference?
No, nobody from us. Do you happen to go, or did you? Okay, no, that's the one.
Any other comments or questions? Linda, you look like you might have something. She's second thoughts. Pavlos.
Yeah, just sort of as in the report's three items. One is, you talked about the sheriffs of the IRA building. A question, do you know the area that has been discussed on the land swap? The reason I'm asking is because in community meetings that happened during the previous iteration, one of the proposals was that a land slap or land addition that would actually go into the floodplain. So I think it's kind of...
That's what they're looking at as well, that talking about the trail on the east side of the railroad depression and how they might look at trading the land for that area, so the west side, for area to the south of the current sheriff's site, which would be the north side of that floodplain area. And I think we had part of that discussion when we were talking kind of context too, and just, what the implication of that might be. So.
Yeah, because Bob said that the only area under development that may be affected by floodplain is the upon mineral, but the reality is that the sheriff's site might also be
and my
affected.
impression was that they would go to that floodplain line and not go into it. Yeah. So they were talking about actually going to that line, which goes fairly far into the current properties.
Okay. Other thing, if you can relate to Charlie, from myself and several neighbors and citizens have talked to me kind of the appreciation for the new pedestrian state law yield to pedestrian signs that they are on Main Street and on Alamo, and actually a request to look about possibility of putting that signs on the pedestrian crosswalk that is the first one east of downtown on Littleton Boulevard. I've noticed myself a couple of times would started to stop to give the opportunity to coming in and realize that I'm actually putting the pedestrians at greater risk. I've had twice people who will go around, curve into me and barrel down and potentially clip anybody that's coming in. I think that those signs in that area would be consistent with what's going on. So if you could just relay. But
sure. Yeah, I think the sign on Main Street is amazingly effective.
Very, very effective, and I think that if we place them also on Littleton Boulevard on that last intersection as we're heading into westbound Littleton as well as eastbound, could add. And then the last item, which is actually a request to the commissioners, our second meeting in November is scheduled for November 22nd, which is the Monday of Thanksgiving week. I would like to ask that we consider moving that meeting to November 29th, which is the Monday after Thanksgiving. So that's a request that I'd like to make, and hopefully we can maybe...
Thanksgiving is the week of the 22nd, so this would be...
We'll just move it to the fifth Monday instead of the fourth Monday, and therefore will not fall within Thanksgiving week, and we can do it pending the Monday after.
Consideration of availability of televising the meeting. I don't know offhand if there's any other meeting that might be scheduled then, but...
we will check. At this point, I'm not aware of anything of it. Good
I think that makes sense. Does that general?
Does that work for everybody else? Because it doesn't work for me.
It doesn't work for Kurt. Okay.
I don't know yet.
We don't know yet. Check availability, and then we'll consider it. Is that reasonable? We have another meeting, two meetings, before that would occur. Back to your point about the crosswalk, that's the other part of that proposal that council is going to hear tomorrow night is not only land swap, but they're going to present their discussion about a new crossing or perhaps the roundabout and so on between the courthouse and the IREA building. So there's that element.
I'm aware that I know that intersection has been a headache on many people's heads, including Charlie's. I just think that adding that yield, state law sign at that intersection could actually improve safety because who knows when that other more comprehensive change may take place, and will be consistent with everything we're doing. And I think it will have the added effect that it kind of begins to slow down traffic as it heads into downtown.
Any other comments, reports, a motion to adjourn?
Any updates on the comp plan? the downtown area?
Yes, Sergey and I met again today. We're hoping to wrap up a draft by early next week and then get something to you for the following meeting is our intent. So that's where we're heading. So it's looking pretty good. I'm quite happy with what we're doing. I think we'll still need to be looking at tinkering a lot more with it and just making sure we covered everything. That's what we're trying to make sure we've done, that we've covered the ideas conceptually. We're trying to make something fairly concise, because I think that's the direction we've been going, is to get something fairly short, but at the same time covering all the ideas. And that's a challenge. So we certainly are going to be looking forward to comments on it. So.
All right.
Move to adjourn.
Very good. Second?
Got it.
All right. I think we're all in favor. Thank you.